People say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when your own blood drains you dry and leaves you for dead? 17 years ago, my family made a choice that shattered me into a million pieces. They thought I was broken forever. They were wrong. I am Margaret Rose Thompson. I am 64 years old, and this is not a story about forgiveness. This is a story about transformation, about rising from ashes they thought would never burn again, and about the reckoning that comes when the abandoned returns stronger than those who cast her aside. Before I unveil the truth that will shake you to your core, please subscribe to Nana's Memory Lane and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Because some stories, no matter how painful, must echo through generations. My story begins in the spring of 1985 in the small town of Willow Creek, nestled in the mountains of North Carolina. Back then, I was Margaret Rose Sullivan, a 30-year-old wife and mother of 2 beautiful children, living what I thought was a blessed life. My husband, Daniel Thompson, was a respected insurance agent in town. We had a lovely colonial-style home on Maple Street with a white picket fence, rose bushes I tended every Saturday morning, and neighbors who waved hello from their porches. Our daughter, Caroline, was 8 years old, a bright-eyed girl with golden curls who loved to read fairy tales under the old oak tree in our backyard. Our son, Michael, was 6, a rambunctious boy who collected rocks and insects, driving me crazy with his muddy shoes, but melting my heart with his gap-toothed smile. I thought I knew what my life was. I thought I understood my place in the world. I was wrong about everything. In those days, Willow Creek was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The population was barely 3,000 souls. Main Street had one traffic light, 2 churches, a pharmacy, a diner called Betty's where the coffee was always hot and the gossip was hotter, and a general store that sold everything from fishing hooks to wedding dresses. My family, the Sullivans, had deep roots in Willow Creek. My father, Patrick Sullivan, owned Sullivan's hardware store, a business his father had started in 1923. My mother, Catherine, was known for her prize-winning apple pies at the county fair and her strict Catholic faith. I had 2 younger sisters, Patricia and Anne, and a younger brother, James. We were raised to believe that family was everything, that loyalty to blood was sacred, that you protected your own no matter what. Those beliefs would later become the chains that bound me and the lies that justified my destruction. I met Daniel Thompson when I was 22 years old, fresh out of secretarial school and working at the county clerk's office. He was 25, charming, ambitious, with dark hair he kept perfectly combed and a smile that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He came from a good family. His father was a banker, his mother was on the church council, and everyone said the Thompsons were people of quality and standing. Daniel courted me properly, the way things were done back then. He asked my father's permission to take me to the movies, brought flowers to my mother, attended Sunday dinners with my family, and never tried anything improper. After 6 months of courtship, he proposed with his grandmother's diamond ring on a crisp October evening by the lake. I said yes without hesitation, believing I had found my forever. We married in June of 1977 at St. Catherine's Catholic Church with 300 guests in attendance. My father paid for everything, a wedding that cost him nearly $5,000, a fortune for a hardware store owner. But he was proud to give his eldest daughter a beautiful wedding. I wore a white satin gown with lace sleeves that my mother and grandmother had sewn together over 3 months. Daniel looked so handsome in his black tuxedo. We danced a Can't Help Falling in Love for our first dance, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. The first few years of marriage were good. Daniel was building his insurance business, working long hours but always coming home to dinner. I kept our small apartment spotless, learned to cook his favorite meals, ironed his shirts until they were perfect. When Caroline was born in 1977, Daniel was over the moon. He held her in his big hands with such tenderness, tears streaming down his face, promising her he would always protect her. When Michael came along 2 years later, our family felt complete. But somewhere between Michael's birth and my 30th birthday, something began to shift. Daniel started working later and later. The smell of perfume that wasn't mine clung to his shirts. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, hotels and towns he'd supposedly visited for business. At first, I pushed the suspicions away, told myself I was being paranoid, that a good wife trusts her husband. My mother had raised me to believe that a woman's duty was to maintain peace in the home, to look the other way when necessary, to preserve the family unit above all else. So I swallowed my doubts and plastered on a smile. I should have listened to the voice in my gut that screamed something was terribly wrong. In March of 1985, everything I thought I knew imploded in the most devastating way possible. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were when I volunteered at Caroline's school library. I came home early because the librarian had a dentist appointment. I pulled into our driveway and noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street, a silver sedan with tinted windows. Something about it made my skin prickle with unease. I entered our house through the side door that led to the kitchen. The house was quiet, but I heard sounds coming from upstairs, music, voices, laughter. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Our bedroom door was closed. I stood outside it for what felt like an eternity, my hand hovering over the doorknob, knowing that whatever I was about to see would change everything. When I opened that door, the scene that greeted me is burned into my memory like a brand. My husband, Daniel, was in our bed, our marriage bed, with another woman. But this wasn't just any woman. This was my youngest sister, and 23 years old, the baby of the Sullivan family. The one I had helped raise, had braided her hair, had taught to ride a bicycle, had consoled through her first heartbreak. They didn't even have the decency to look ashamed, and pulled the sheet up to cover herself, and had the audacity to look annoyed at the interruption, as if I had walked in on something mundane instead of the ultimate betrayal. Daniel just stared at me, his face blank, emotionless. I couldn't speak. Couldn't scream. Couldn't move. My body had turned to stone. Finally, words came, though they didn't sound like my voice. "What is this? What are you doing?" Anne sat up, her auburn hair tousled, her green eyes cold. "Margaret, don't be dramatic. We didn't mean for you to find out this way, but honestly, it's time we all faced reality." "Reality," I managed to choke out. "You're sleeping with my husband." "Our husband," she corrected, as if that made it better. "Daniel has been in love with me for over a year. We tried to stay away from each other, but love is love." I turned to Daniel, waiting for him to deny it, to tell me this was all some horrible mistake, some nightmare I would wake up from. Instead, he stood up, pulled on his pants, and looked at me with something I can only describe as relief. "Margaret, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but Anne is right. I've been unhappy in this marriage for a long time. I love Anne, we want to be together." The floor beneath me seemed to dissolve. I grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing. My children. What about Caroline and Michael? What about our family? Anne spoke up again, her voice matter of fact, businesslike. "We've already discussed this with your parents and the family. Everyone agrees that it's best if you and Daniel divorce quietly. Daniel will marry me, and we'll raise Caroline and Michael together. You can still see them, of course, but it's better for the children to have a stable home with two parents who actually love each other." His words hit me like physical blows. "You discussed this with my family? With my parents? When? For how long?" Daniel had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Margaret, everyone can see you've been struggling. You're not yourself. You've been distant, distracted. The children need stability. Your family agrees that Anne would be a better mother figure for them right now. A better mother figure. The woman who betrayed me, who destroyed my marriage, who coveted everything I had, would be a better mother to my babies than I would. I stumbled backward out of that room, down the stairs, and out of that house. I got in my car and drove. I don't remember where I went or how long I drove. Hours later, I found myself at my parents' house, the place that had always been my sanctuary, my safe harbor. I burst through the front door, tears streaming down my face, barely able to breathe. Mom, Dad, I need help. Something terrible has happened. My mother was in the kitchen, as always, apron tied around her waist. My father sat in his recliner reading the newspaper. They looked up at my entrance, but their expressions weren't surprise or concern. They were resignation. You know, I whispered. You already know. My father folded his newspaper carefully, deliberately, taking his time before meeting my eyes. Margaret, sit down. We need to talk about this calmly. Calmly, I shrieked. I just found my husband in bed with my sister and you want me to be calm. My mother wiped her hands on her apron and came to sit at the kitchen table, gesturing for me to join her. Margaret Rose, your father and I have been aware of Daniel and Anne's feelings for each other for several months now. They came to us, torn up with guilt, asking for guidance. We've spent a great deal of time in prayer about this situation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've known for months, and you said nothing to me? You let me walk around like a fool while my husband and my sister carried on behind my back. My father's face hardened. Watch your tone, young lady. We are still your parents, and you will show respect in this house. We didn't tell you because we were trying to find the best solution for everyone involved. And the best solution is what? I asked bitterly. For me to step aside and let him take my life. My mother reached across the table to take my hand, but I yanked it away. Margaret, we love you. But we have to think about what's best for the children, for the family as a whole. Daniel and Anne are deeply in love. That kind of love is rare and precious. You and Daniel, well, you married young. Sometimes these things happen. The children need a stable home with parents who love each other. They need structure, consistency. You've been, well, struggling lately. We've all noticed. I felt like I was in an alternate reality. Struggling. What are you talking about? My mother exchanged a glance with my father. You've been forgetful, emotional, not yourself. Anne has been helping with the children more and more. They've grown very attached to her. Caroline even calls her mama, and sometimes the ground fell out from under me completely. You've been letting this happen? You've been allowing my sister to replace me with my own children while I thought everything was fine. My father stood up, his voice stern. Margaret, we've made our decision. Daniel and Anne will marry as soon as the divorce is finalized. You will retain visitation rights with the children every other weekend, but primary custody will go to Daniel. The house will remain with him and Anne since the children need stability. Your mother and I will help you find an apartment and get settled. If you cooperate and don't make a scene, we'll make sure you're taken care of financially. I stared at these people. My parents, the ones who were supposed to protect me. Fight for me, stand by me no matter what. And they were calmly outlining the terms of my destruction as if they were discussing the weather. What about what I want? What about my rights as a mother? What about the vows Daniel made to me? My mother's face softened slightly. Oh, sweetheart. Sometimes we have to sacrifice our own happiness for the greater good. Anne is young, vibrant, and full of life. She can give Daniel what you can't anymore. And the children, well, they need a mother who is present, engaged, happy. You've seemed so tired lately, so worn down. This might actually be a blessing in disguise for you too. A chance to start fresh, find yourself. I felt something break inside me then, something fundamental and irreparable. These weren't my parents. These were strangers wearing familiar faces, speaking in familiar voices, but utterly unrecognizable to me. I walked out of that house and never looked back. Not that day, not ever. Over the next 3 months, my world was systematically dismantled. Daniel filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. His lawyer, who happened to be a friend of my father's, painted me as an unstable woman who had neglected her duties as a wife and mother. My own family provided statements supporting this narrative. My mother testified that I had seemed depressed and disconnected. My sister Patricia claimed I had told her I felt overwhelmed by motherhood. Even my brother James, who I thought might stand by me, said he believed the children would be better off with Daniel, and I tried to fight. I hired a lawyer with money I didn't have, took out loans, begged for help. But in a small town like Willow Creek, reputation is everything. The Thompsons and the Sullivans were respected families. I was painted as the hysterical woman who couldn't accept reality, who was having a breakdown, who was being selfish by fighting the inevitable. The judge, who had known my father for 30 years, awarded primary custody to Daniel. I was granted visitation every other weekend and one evening during the week. The house went to Daniel. The savings were split, but after legal fees, I was left with almost nothing. The final blow came when I went to pick up Caroline and Michael for my first court-ordered visitation. I knocked on the door of what used to be my home. Anne answered, wearing an apron I recognized as mine, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. She was already pregnant with Daniel's child. "The children are upstairs getting ready," she said, not unkindly but with a proprietary air that made my blood boil. "Margaret, I want you to know that I'll take good care of them. I really do love them like they're my own." Before I could respond, Caroline came running down the stairs, followed by Michael. They hugged me, but there was a distance there that hadn't existed before. Someone had been talking to them, planting seeds. Over the next 6 months, my visitations became increasingly painful. Caroline started calling them Mama and me Margaret. Michael would talk excitedly about the new baby coming and how he was going to be a big brother. When I tried to correct them, tried to remind them that I was their mother, they would look at me with confusion and pity. The final straw came on a cold November evening in 1985. I went to pick up the children for my weekend visitation. Daniel met me at the door instead of letting me inside. "Margaret, we need to talk. Anne and I have been discussing this, and we think it might be better if you took a step back from the children for a while." "A step back?" I repeated incredulously. "They're my children, Daniel. You can't just take them away from me." He had the audacity to look sympathetic. "You're upsetting them. Every time you visit, they come back confused and agitated. Caroline cried for 2 hours last weekend because you told her you were her real mother and was just her aunt. You're confusing them, and it's not healthy." I felt panic rising in my chest. "I have a court order. I have rights." Daniel sighed. "Rights, yes. But think about what's best for Caroline and Michael. They're happy here. They've adjusted. Every time you show up, you disrupt their peace. Don't you love them enough to let them be happy?" It was emotional blackmail of the cruelest kind. And in my exhausted, devastated state, I began to believe he might be right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe my presence was hurting them. Maybe everyone was right and I was wrong. That night, I went home to my dingy apartment above the hardware store on the poor side of town, and I made a decision. I would disappear. Not forever, just until I could figure out how to fight back, how to prove I wasn't the broken, unstable woman they claimed I was. I needed time to heal, to get stronger, to build a life that would prove I was capable of being the mother my children deserved. I didn't know then that disappearing would become permanent exile, that my family would use my absence as final proof of my unfitness. That 17 years would pass before I saw Willow Creek again. I left town in December of 1985 with $300 to my name, a suitcase of clothes, and a heart so shattered I wasn't sure it would ever beat properly again. I had no plan, no destination, just a desperate need to get far away from the place where everyone I loved had betrayed me. I ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, a city big enough to get lost in, far enough from Willow Creek that I wouldn't accidentally run into anyone I knew. For the first month, I lived in a women's shelter, sharing a room with 6 other women who had their own stories of loss and betrayal. I cried myself to sleep every night, clutching a photograph of Caroline and Michael, wondering if they missed me, if they remembered me, if and had already erased me completely from their lives. But something happened during those dark, desperate days. I got angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that burns out quickly, but a cold, sustained fury that became fuel. I had spent my entire life being what other people wanted me to be. The perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother. And where had it gotten me? Abandoned, betrayed, and broken. I decided that if I was going to survive, I needed to become someone entirely different. Someone strong. Someone independent. Someone who would never, ever be at the mercy of anyone else again. I got a job as a night shift waitress at a 24-hour diner called the Silver Skillet. The work was hard, the customers were sometimes mean, and my feet ached constantly. But it was honest work, and it paid enough to rent a tiny studio apartment in a rough neighborhood. During the day, while most people slept, I went to the public library. I spent hours reading everything I could get my hands on. Business books, self-help books, biographies of successful people. I studied how people built wealth, how they overcame adversity, how they transformed themselves. I took free classes offered by the library on computer skills, which were just becoming essential in the mid-80s. I learned word processing, spreadsheets, basic programming. I was 30 years old and starting from absolute zero, but I was determined to build something from nothing. After 6 months at the diner, I had saved enough to buy decent clothes from a thrift store and apply for better jobs. I got hired as a receptionist at a small real estate office. The pay wasn't much better than waitressing, but it was daytime hours, and it got my foot in the door of an industry I found fascinating. I watched the real estate agents who came through the office. I noticed who was successful and who wasn't. The successful ones weren't necessarily the smartest or the most educated. They were the ones who worked the hardest, who followed up relentlessly, who treated every client like they were the most important person in the world. I studied them like a scientist studying a new species. Within a year, I had my real estate license. The broker who owned the office, a woman named Judith Hernandez, took me under her wing. She was a hard-nosed businesswoman who had built her company from nothing, and she recognized hunger when she saw it. "Margaret," she told me over coffee one morning, "you've got something most agents don't have. You've got nothing to lose. That makes you dangerous. In a good way. Use it," and I did. I worked 7 days a week. I took clients no other agent wanted, the difficult ones, the ones with impossible demands, the ones with limited budgets. I showed houses in the rain, in the heat, late at night, early in the morning. I learned every neighborhood in Atlanta, every school district, every property value trend. I made myself invaluable. By 1988, 3 years after leaving Willow Creek, I was the top-selling agent in Judith's office. I had moved to a better apartment, bought my first car, a used Honda Civic that I loved like a child, and had started saving serious money. But success in business didn't heal the wound in my heart. Every night, I thought about Caroline and Michael. I would calculate their ages. Caroline would be 11 now. Michael would be 9. What did they look like? What were their interests? Did they ever ask about me? Did they hate me for leaving? I called my lawyer back in Willow Creek once to ask about reinstating my visitation rights. He told me bluntly that Daniel Handon had filed to have my parental rights terminated on the grounds of abandonment. The hearing had taken place without my knowledge since they couldn't locate me to serve papers. My rights had been terminated. Legally, I was no longer Caroline and Michael's mother, and had adopted them. They had her last name now. I hung up the phone and didn't cry. I had no tears left. Instead, I made a vow. I would become so successful, so wealthy, so powerful that one day, when my children were adults and could make their own choices, they would find me and see that I wasn't the broken, unstable woman my family had painted me to be. I would prove them all wrong. The 90s were my decade of transformation. I left Judith's office in 1990 and started my own real estate company, Thompson Properties. Yes, I kept my married name, not out of any lingering affection for Daniel, but because changing it legally was expensive and time-consuming, and I had better uses for my resources. My company focused on helping first-time homebuyers, people who, like me, had started with nothing and were trying to build something. I hired agents who were hungry, who had something to prove, who weren't afraid of hard work. We developed a reputation for being the company that got deals done when other companies gave up. By 1995, Thompson Properties had 15 agents and 3 offices across Atlanta. I had moved into a beautiful condo in Buckhead, drove a Mercedes, wore designer suits. I had transformed myself from Margaret, the abandoned wife, into Margaret Thompson, successful businesswoman. But I still felt hollow inside. In 1998, something happened that changed the trajectory of my life again. I met a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen at a charity fundraiser for homeless families. Sarah was a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma recovery. We struck up a conversation about the families the charity served, and somehow I found myself telling her my story. Not the public version I had crafted for business associates, but the real, raw truth about Willow Creek, about the betrayal, about my children. Sarah listened without judgment, and when I finished, she said something that struck me like lightning. Margaret, you've done an amazing job rebuilding your external life, but you haven't dealt with your trauma at all. You're still running from it. Until you face what happened to you, really face it and process it, you'll never truly heal. She recommended I start therapy, and for the first time in 13 years, I did. I spent the next 4 years in intensive therapy, unpacking the betrayal, the abandonment, the loss. I learned about narcissistic family systems, about scapegoating, about trauma bonding. I learned that what my family did to me wasn't just cruel, it was abusive. I learned that I had spent my entire life being gaslight, made to doubt my own reality, my own worth. Most importantly, I learned that none of it was my fault. The affair wasn't my fault. The family choosing and over me wasn't my fault. Losing my children wasn't my fault. I had been a victim of people who valued appearance over integrity, who chose convenience over justice, who sacrificed one member of the family to maintain their comfortable illusions. That realization was both liberating and enraging. Through therapy, I also made a decision. I would find out what happened to my children. Not to disrupt their lives, they were adults now or close to it, but just to know they were okay. I hired a private investigator, a retired police detective named Marcus Webb, who specialized in finding people. In 2002, 17 years after I had left Willow Creek, Marcus provided me with a full report on my family. Daniel and Ann were still married, still living in my old house on Maple Street. They had 3 children together in addition to Caroline and Michael, a daughter named Jennifer, and twin boys, Nathan and Zachary. Daniel's insurance business had struggled over the years. He had filed for bankruptcy in 1993 and had been working as a claims adjuster for someone else's company since then, and worked part-time as a receptionist at a dentist's office. They were lower middle class, struggling with debt, living paycheck to paycheck. My parents were still alive, both in their late 70s, still living in the same house I had grown up in. My father had sold Sullivan's hardware store in 1992 when big box stores moved into the area and made small hardware stores obsolete. My mother's health was declining. She had diabetes and heart problems. My sister Patricia had married a car mechanic and had 4 children. They lived in a trailer park on the outskirts of town. My brother James was divorced, working at a factory, barely scraping by. And my children. Caroline was 25 years old, married to a man named Bradley Wilson, working as a bank teller. She had a 2-year-old daughter. Michael was 23, unmarried, working construction, living with Daniel and because he couldn't afford his own place, neither of them had gone to college. Neither of them seemed to be thriving in any meaningful way. When I looked at their pictures, I saw my features in their faces, but they were strangers to me. Marcus also provided information I hadn't asked for, but that he thought I should know. Anne's reputation in town was apparently not great. She was known for being sharp-tongued and bitter. People whispered that Daniel had traded down when he left me for her. The Sullivan family, once respected, had fallen on hard times financially and socially. My father's bankruptcy when he lost the store had been a humiliation. My mother's illnesses had drained their savings. The family that had once seemed so powerful, so united against me, had crumbled in the years since I left. There was a certain poetic justice in that, but it didn't make me feel better. It just made me feel sad for the waste of it all. I put Marcus's report in a drawer and tried to move on with my life. I threw myself even harder into my business, into charity work, into building a life that mattered. By 2007, Thompson Properties was one of the most successful independent real estate companies in Georgia. I had 50 agents working for me, offices in 5 cities, a net worth that had climbed into the millions. I sat on the boards of several charities. I was respected in the business community. I had built the life I had dreamed of, but I was 52 years old, alone, and still carrying the wound of what had been done to me. Then, in August of 2007, I received a phone call that changed everything. My mother was dying. The call came from a hospital in Asheville, about an hour from Willow Creek. Catherine Sullivan had suffered a massive stroke. She was not expected to survive more than a few days. The hospital had found my number in her emergency contact list, the same number I had kept all these years in case my children ever tried to reach me. The nurse asked if I would come. I told her I would think about it and hung up. For 3 days, I wrestled with the decision. Part of me wanted to let her die without giving her the satisfaction of seeing me. She had chosen an over me. She had supported the theft of my children. She had testified against me in court. She deserved nothing from me. But another part of me, the part that therapy had helped me develop, knew that I needed closure. I needed to look her in the eye and tell her exactly what she had done to me. I needed to say my piece, not for her sake, but for mine. So I got in my car, a sleek black BMW now, and drove the 4 hours from Atlanta to Asheville. When I walked into that hospital room, I barely recognized the woman in the bed. My mother had been a force of nature, strong, opinionated, always moving. The woman in the hospital bed was tiny, shrunken, tubes and wires everywhere. Her skin grey, her breathing labored, but her eyes were still sharp. And when she saw me, those eyes widened with shock. Margaret, her voice was barely a whisper. You came. I stood at the foot of her bed, maintaining distance. Hello, Mother. She tried to reach out a hand toward me, but I didn't move. I thought I would never see you again. I kept my voice flat, emotionless. You weren't supposed to. You made it very clear 17 years ago that I was not part of this family anymore. Tears filled her eyes. Margaret, I need to tell you something before I die. I need you to forgive me. The audacity of it took my breath away. Forgive you? You want me to forgive you? With effort, she nodded. I was wrong. We were all wrong. What we did to you, it was evil. We chose, and because she was younger, prettier, more fun. We chose Daniel because he was charming, and we didn't want to deal with the scandal of a divorce. We sacrificed you to keep up appearances. And we have paid for it every day since. I stepped closer to the bed, my hands clenched into fists. You paid for it. What about what I paid? You took my children from me. You destroyed my reputation. You left me with nothing. And now you want absolution on your deathbed. She closed her eyes, and tears leaked out, and made Daniel miserable. The children resented her. She was cruel to them when we weren't looking. Caroline ran away when she was 16 and lived with friends until she aged out of the system. Michael got into drugs for a while. They never went to college because Daniel couldn't afford it after the bankruptcy. Everything fell apart. Good, I said coldly. I'm glad you all got exactly what you deserved. My mother's eyes opened again, and now they were pleading. Margaret, please. I'm dying. Don't let me die with this between us. I leaned close to her, close enough that she could see the steel in my eyes. Mother, you made your choice 17 years ago. You chose a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth. You chose appearances over integrity. You chose an over me. And now you want me to make you feel better about that choice so you can die in peace. I won't give you that gift. You don't deserve it. Her face crumpled, and her breathing became more labored. Margaret, please. I know what we did was unforgivable, but please, for the sake of the family. For your father. For your sisters and brother. For Caroline and Michael. Don't let this hatred consume you. I straightened up and looked down at this woman who had given birth to me, but had never truly been a mother. Hatred, no, mother. I don't hate you. Hatred requires caring, and I stopped caring about any of you a long time ago. I just wanted you to know that I survived. I thrived. I built an incredible life without a single member of this family. And when you're gone, I will continue living that life, and you will be nothing but a cautionary tale I tell people about the dangers of toxic families. I turned to leave, and her weak voice called after me. Your children. They ask about you sometimes. They want to know where you are, why you left. What should I tell them? I paused at the door. Tell them the truth. Tell them their mother was driven away by a family that valued appearances over love. Tell them I became successful and happy. And tell them that if they ever want to know me, they know my name. Thompson Properties. I'm not hard to find. I walked out of that hospital room and never looked back. My mother died 2 days later. I didn't attend the funeral. But I did send a massive floral arrangement with a card that read, Catherine Sullivan, devoted mother to some of her children. The message was petty, but I didn't care. After the funeral, according to Marcus, whom I had asked to monitor the situation, my family was outraged by my display. They called me heartless, cruel, vindictive. They said I had shown my true colors by refusing to forgive a dying woman. But something else happened too. Caroline called me. After all those years, after 17 years of silence, my daughter tracked down my number through Thompson Properties and called me. I was in my office when my assistant buzzed me, Ms. Thompson, there's a Caroline Wilson on the line. She says she's your daughter. My heart stopped. I stared at the phone like it might explode. After a moment, I picked it up. This is Margaret Thompson. The voice on the other end was tentative, nervous. This is Caroline. Caroline Thompson. Or I guess Caroline Wilson now. You probably don't remember me. I remember you, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You were 8 years old when I last saw you. You loved fairy tales and had golden curls. There was a sharp intake of breath. You do remember. I thought, Mama, and said you didn't care about us, that you left because you didn't want to be a mother anymore. The casual way she called and Mama stabbed through me like a knife. But I kept my voice calm. Is that what they told you? It's not true, Caroline. I didn't leave because I didn't want you. I left because I was forced out by people who should have protected me. There was a long silence. Grandma Catherine, before she died, she told me some things. She said you were driven away. She said the family chosen over you because it was easier. She said I should find you and hear your side of the story. So I took a breath. If you want to know what really happened, I'll tell you. But you need to understand that the truth is going to be very different from what you've been told your whole life. We met a week later at a coffee shop in Charlotte, North Carolina. Neutral territory for both of us. When I saw her walk in, my breath caught. She looked so much like me at that age, the same dark hair, the same hazel eyes, the same delicate build. But there was a hardness around her mouth, a weariness in her eyes that came from a difficult life. We sat across from each other, to strangers who shared DNA and a destroyed history. For 3 hours, I told her everything. I told her about finding Daniel and in our bed, about how the family had supported them, about how I had been painted as unstable and unfit, about how I had fought and lost, about how I had finally left because I had been told my presence was hurting her and Michael. I told her about building my life from nothing, about therapy, about learning that what happened to me wasn't my fault. Caroline listened without interrupting, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, tears. She told me about her childhood after I left. She told me that Anne had been loving and attentive when other people were around, but cold and critical when they were alone. She told me about the constant comparisons to Anne's biological children, how she and Michael were always found lacking. She told me about how Daniel had withdrawn into himself, working long hours to avoid being home, leaving them to Anne's mercies. She told me about running away at 16 because she couldn't take it anymore, about living on friends' couches, about barely graduating high school. She told me about marrying Bradley at 19 because she was desperate for someone to love her, about her daughter Emma, who was the only bright spot in her life. By the time she finished, we were both crying. Margaret, I don't even know what to call you. You're my mother, but Anne raised me. I don't know how to process any of this. I reached across the table and took her hand, the first time I had touched my daughter in 17 years. Call me whatever feels right to you. I don't expect anything from you, Caroline. I just want you to know the truth and to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. We started meeting regularly after that. Once a month at first, then more frequently. I met my granddaughter Emma, a precocious 4-year-old with Caroline's golden curls. I learned about Caroline's struggles with her marriage to Bradley, who was loving but financially irresponsible. I helped her quietly, setting up a savings account for Emma's education, helping them with a down payment on a small house, never asking for anything in return. Michael was harder. When Caroline told him she had found me, he was furious. According to Caroline, he yelled that I had abandoned them, that I was a coward who ran away when things got tough, that I had no right to come back into their lives now. I wrote him a letter, a long, detailed explanation of everything that had happened, along with copies of court documents, the testimony that my family had given against me. Proof of everything I was saying. I told him I understood his anger, that he had every right to feel betrayed, but that I wanted him to know the truth before he made his final judgment about me. I didn't hear from him for 6 months. Then, on a cold January day in 2008, he showed up at my office in Atlanta. My assistant buzzed me again, sounding nervous this time. "Miss Thompson, there's a young man here who says he's your son. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Send him in," I said, my heart pounding. The man who walked into my office was tall, broad-shouldered, with Daniel's dark hair and my hazel eyes. He had tattoos on his forearms and the weathered look of someone who worked with his hands. He stood in the doorway, looking around at my elegant office, at the awards on the walls, at the success I had built, and his face was unreadable. Hello, Michael. He shoved his hands in his pockets. So you're rich now. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. I've done well for myself, yes. Would you like to sit? He sat, but on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt. I read your letter. I looked at the documents. I talked to some people who remember what happened back then. My old Little League coach, Mr. Henderson, he remembered you. He said you came to every single one of my games until you left. He said you were the one who taught me how to hold a bat properly, not Daniel. I nodded. Fighting back tears at the memory. You were 6 years old. You had so much natural talent, but you were holding the bat too tight. I showed you how to relax your grip. Why didn't you fight harder? His voice was raw, accusatory. Why didn't you take us and run? Why didn't you kidnap us if you had to? Why didn't you do something instead of just leaving us with them? I took a breath, knowing this was the moment that would determine whether I could have a relationship with my son or not. Michael, I was 30 years old, with no money, no support system, no resources. Your father had money and lawyers. My own family testified against me in court. I tried to fight, and I lost. When I was told that my presence was upsetting you, children, that I was confusing you, I believed it because everyone I had ever trusted was telling me the same thing. I thought I was doing what was best for you by stepping back. That was the wrong choice, I continued. I should have fought harder. I should have stayed close by, even if I couldn't see you. I should have found a way to let you know I hadn't abandoned you. But I was broken, Michael. I was so completely destroyed by the betrayal of everyone I loved that I couldn't think straight. I ran because I didn't know what else to do. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands, and used to tell us you were crazy, that you had mental problems, that you were dangerous, and that's why the court took us away from you. But you're not crazy. You're the most together person I've ever met. I smiled sadly. I wasn't always this way. It took years of therapy, years of hard work, years of rebuilding myself piece by piece. I had to learn how to trust people again, how to trust myself again. I had to learn that I had value, that I deserved good things, that what happened wasn't my fault. We talked for hours that day. He told me about his struggles, about dropping out of school at 16, about getting into drugs, about the years he spent angry at the world. He told me about getting clean 3 years ago, about learning construction work, about trying to build a life, but always feeling like something was missing. He told me about the resentment he felt toward Daniel and Anne, about the way they had pitted him and Caroline against each other and against Anne's other children, about the constant feeling of being less than, unwanted, tolerated but not loved. By the time he left, we had agreed to stay in touch. It was tentative, fragile, but it was a start. Over the next year, I built relationships with both of my children. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when the pain of the lost years threatened to overwhelm us all. But slowly, painfully, we began to heal. I met Michael's girlfriend, a sweet woman named Rachel who was helping him stay clean and build a better life. I watched Emma grow and thrive. I provided support when it was needed, but carefully, making sure I wasn't trying to buy their love or overcompensate for the lost years. And then, in the fall of 2009, something happened that brought everything full circle. My father had a heart attack. Unlike with my mother, I didn't rush to his bedside. But Caroline called me, crying, "Margaret, I know you have no reason to care, but Grandpa Patrick is asking for you. He says he needs to talk to you before he dies. He says he has things to tell you that you need to know." I didn't want to go. I had said everything I needed to say when my mother died. But Caroline pressed, "Please, for me, I need to understand what happened back then." He's saying things, dropping hints about secrets. I think there's more to the story than what we know. So I drove back to Willow Creek for the first time in 17 years. The town had changed very little. Main Street had a few different businesses, but it was still the same small, suffocating place I had fled all those years ago. The hospital was small and outdated. I found my father's room easily. My sister Patricia was there, along with my brother James. They looked up when I walked in, and the shock on their faces was almost comical. Margaret, Patricia stood up. Her face a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite read. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," I said coolly. "Where is he?" They parted, and I saw my father in the bed. He had aged badly. He was only 77, but he looked 90, shrunken and grey, with an oxygen mask over his face. When he saw me, he fumbled with the mask, pulling it away. "Margaret Rose, you came." I stayed near the door. "Caroline said you wanted to talk to me." "Make it quick. I have a long drive back to Atlanta." Patricia gasped. "How can you be so cold?" "He's your father." I turned to her. "No, Patricia, a father protects his children. A father stands by his children when they're hurting. A father doesn't testify in court that his daughter is unfit to raise her own children. Patrick Sullivan is the man who impregnated my mother. That's where our relationship begins and ends." My father waved a weak hand. "Patricia, James, leave us. I need to talk to Margaret alone." They protested, but he insisted, and eventually they filed out, shooting me hostile looks as they went. When the door closed, my father gestured for me to come closer. I stayed where I was. "You can talk from there. I'm not hard of hearing." He sighed. "Margaret, I'm dying. The doctors give me a few days at most. I need to tell you something that I should have told you 24 years ago. Something that changes everything." I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." He closed his eyes, gathering strength. "Daniel didn't just have an affair with Anne. He had been having an affair with her for 2 years before you found them. It started when Anne was 21, when you and Daniel had been married for 6 years. My blood ran cold. 2 years. He nodded. "And came to your mother and me about a year in. She was torn up with guilt. She wanted to break it off, but she said she was in love with Daniel. She said Daniel had told her that he had made a mistake, marrying you, that he loved her but felt trapped because of the children. I felt dizzy. You knew for a year before I found out." He opened his eyes, and I saw shame there. "We knew, and we didn't tell you because we were trying to figure out how to handle it. Your mother and I, we prayed about it. We talked about it for hours. We even confronted Daniel. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you give me the chance to decide what to do with my own marriage? Because," he said, and his voice broke, "Daniel told us something that made us believe we had no choice. He told us that if we didn't support him and Anne, if we tried to stop them or tell you the truth, he would take the children and disappear. He would take Caroline and Michael somewhere we would never find them, and you would never see them again." The room spun. "What?" He had connections, your father continued, through his insurance business. He knew people who could help someone disappear with children. He told us he had it all planned. He had money hidden away. He had documents prepared. If we didn't cooperate, the children would vanish. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "So you chose to betray me to save the children." "We chose to handle it in a way where the children would be safe and you would still be able to see them," he said. "We thought if we supported the divorce, if we made it look like it was the best thing for everyone, Daniel would stay in Willow Creek where you could maintain a relationship with Caroline and Michael. If we had told you the truth, if we had supported you in fighting him, he would have taken the children and you would have lost them forever." I sank into the chair, my legs no longer able to support me. "But you destroyed my reputation. You testified that I was unfit. You took away my custody." My father's face crumpled. That was Daniel's condition. He said that if he was going to stay and let you have visitation, he needed to have full custody. He needed the court to say you were the problem, not him. He said it was the only way to protect his business reputation, to protect the children from gossip. He promised that once everything was settled, he would be generous with visitation, that you would be able to be part of their lives. We thought we were protecting you and the children. I couldn't breathe. You destroyed me to protect me. We were wrong, he whispered. We were so wrong. Daniel lied to us. As soon as the divorce was final, he started limiting your visitation. He turned the children against you. We tried to intervene, but he threatened us again. He said if we helped you, he would take the children away. By the time we realized we had made a terrible mistake, it was too late. You were gone. I looked at this old, dying man, and I felt nothing but cold emptiness. Did she know he was blackmailing you? He nodded. She knew. She was in on it from the beginning. She wanted your life, Margaret, your husband, your children, your house, everything. And she was willing to help Daniel destroy you to get it. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. It hadn't just been a tragic betrayal, it had been a calculated conspiracy. Daniel Andon had systematically destroyed my life, using my own family as weapons against me. And my parents had been too cowardly to stand up to them. Did Caroline and Michael know any of this? I asked. He shook his head. No, we never told them. We told ourselves we were protecting them from the ugly truth. But really, we were protecting ourselves from their judgment. I stood up. You were right about one thing. You should have told me this 24 years ago. If I had known the full truth, I might have made different choices. But instead, you let me believe that my own parents chose my sister over me for no reason other than that she was younger and prettier. You let me carry that wound for decades. My father reached out a shaking hand. Margaret, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw a weak, frightened old man who had made cowardly choices and had spent 24 years living with the consequences. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. What you did was unforgivable. You were supposed to protect me. I stood up. You were right about one thing. You should have told me this 24 years ago. If I had known the full truth, I might have made different choices. But instead, you let me believe that my own parents chose my sister over me for no reason other than that she was younger and prettier. You let me carry that wound for decades. My father reached out a shaking hand. Margaret, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw a weak, frightened old man who had made cowardly choices and had spent 24 years living with the consequences. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. What you did was unforgivable. You were supposed to protect me, and instead, you sacrificed me. But I understand now that it was more complicated than I thought. You were caught between impossible choices, and you chose wrong. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it helps me understand it. Will you tell Caroline and Michael? He asked. They deserve to know the truth. I'll tell them, I said. They do deserve to know. And then they can decide for themselves how they want to handle this family and its legacy of lies. Bradley, when it became clear he would never grow up and contribute equally to their family. Michael, I helped in a different way. He wanted to start his own construction company, but he had no capital and no credit. I assigned loans, connected him with contractors I knew through my real estate business, and helped him build a client base. Within 3 years, Thompson Construction was a thriving business with 12 employees. Michael paid back every penny I loaned him, with interest, because he was proud and wanted to succeed on his own merits. I respected that. By 2015, 30 years after I had left Willow Creek, my children and I had built real relationships. Not perfect ones. We all carried scars from the lost years, but honest, loving relationships based on truth rather than lies. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when I would return to Willow Creek not as the broken, abandoned woman who had fled, but as the successful, powerful woman I had become. It happened because of Emma, my granddaughter. She was now 14 years old, and her school had chosen her to give a speech at a regional youth leadership conference that happened to be held in Willow Creek. Caroline called me, nervous. "Margaret, Emma wants you there. But it's in Willow Creek. Daniel and Ann will probably be there. Half the town will be there. Are you okay with that?" I smiled. "Caroline, I've been waiting for this moment for 30 years. I'll be there. The day of the conference." I dressed carefully. A designer suit that had cost more than Daniel probably made in a month, shoes that were worth a car payment, jewelry that was subtle but unmistakably expensive. I had my hair and makeup done professionally. I drove to Willow Creek in my Mercedes, and I walked into that community center like I owned it. The reaction was immediate. People who hadn't seen me in 3 decades stopped mid-conversation and stared. Whispers rippled through the room. "Is that Margaret Sullivan? No, it can't be. Look at her. She looks incredible. What is she doing here?" I found Caroline and Michael with their families. Emma ran up and hugged me. "Grandma Margaret, you came. You look like a movie star." I hugged her back. "I wouldn't miss this for anything, sweetheart. You're going to be amazing." Then I saw them. Daniel and Ann sitting in the middle of the auditorium with their 3 younger children. Daniel had gained at least 60 pounds. His hair was grey and thin. He looked old and tired. Ann had aged even worse. She was heavy, her face lined with bitterness, her clothes cheap and ill-fitting. They saw me at the same moment I saw them. The shock on their faces was everything I had dreamed of. I smiled at them, a cool, triumphant smile, and gave a little wave. Then I turned my back and focused on my granddaughter. Emma's speech was beautiful, all about overcoming adversity and not letting other people define you. She talked about how her mother had struggled but never gave up, how her uncle had overcome addiction to build a successful business, and how her grandmother had lost everything but had built an empire from nothing. She didn't name me directly, but everyone in that room knew who she was talking about. When she finished, she received a standing ovation. I was crying, not from sadness but from pride. This was my legacy, not the broken family I had left behind, but this strong, articulate young woman who carried my bloodline and my spirit. After the ceremony, people approached me cautiously. Old acquaintances who hadn't defended me 30 years ago, but who now wanted to bask in the glow of my success. Mrs. Peterson from the church, Mr. Henderson who had coached Michael in Little League, Betty from the diner. I was polite but distant. Finally, Daniel approached. He looked nervous, sweating despite the air conditioning. "Margaret," he said, "you look well." I looked him up and down slowly, taking in every detail of his decline. "Daniel, you look exactly like what you are." He flinched. "I deserve that." "Margaret, I know I can never make up for what I did, but I want you to know that I regret it. Every day, I regret it. Do you regret the affair?" I asked pleasantly, as if we were discussing the weather. "Do you regret the blackmail? Do you regret conspiring to destroy my reputation and take my children? Or do you just regret that it didn't work out the way you planned?" He paled. "I thought you didn't know about the blackmail." "My father told me everything before he died," I said. "I know exactly what you did, Daniel. You threatened my parents. You blackmailed them into betraying me. You systematically destroyed my life so you could have your affair without consequences." He looked around nervously, aware that people were watching us. "Can we talk privately?" "No," I said firmly. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say right here." He glanced back at Anne, who was watching us with obvious anxiety. Margaret, I was young and stupid. I made terrible choices. But I did try to be a good father to Caroline and Michael. You were a terrible father, I said, and my voice was loud enough that several people nearby turned to stare. You turned them against me. You limited my visitation. You allowed Anne to mistreat them. You let them grow up thinking they were unwanted. Caroline ran away at 16 because your home was so toxic. Michael turned to drugs. Neither of them went to college. You destroyed their childhoods just like you destroyed my life. Daniel's face flushed red. I did the best I could. Your best was pathetic, I said. But I want to thank you, Daniel. Thank me for what? For being exactly the weak, selfish, cowardly man I needed you to be. Because if you had been a decent person, I might have stayed in this suffocating little town. I might have remained the small, frightened woman you tried to break. Instead, you pushed me out into the world, and I became someone powerful, someone successful, someone who built an empire while you were filing for bankruptcy. So thank you, Daniel. You gave me the greatest gift, freedom from you and from this toxic place. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, humiliated in front of half the town. Anne approached me next, blocking my path to the exit. She looked even worse up close, her face haggard, her eyes red-rimmed. Margaret, she said, and her voice trembled. I need to talk to you. I stopped but didn't bother to hide my contempt. Hello, Anne, you've aged. She flinched. I deserve that too. Margaret, I've wanted to apologize to you for so long. 30 years too late, I said. An apology now means nothing. She pressed on. I was young and selfish. I saw something I wanted, and I took it without thinking about the consequences. But I've paid for it, Margaret. Every single day, I've paid for it, have you? I asked skeptically. Because from where I'm standing, you got exactly what you wanted. You got Daniel, my house, my life. She laughed bitterly. Is that what you think? Margaret, I got hell. Daniel has resented me from the moment the affair stopped being exciting. He's blamed me for his failed business, for the financial problems, for everything that went wrong in his life. Caroline and Michael hated me. They always knew I wasn't their real mother, and they punished me for it every chance they got. My own children grew up watching their father pine for a life he threw away. Do you know what it's like to live with a man who regrets choosing you? I smiled coldly. No, and I don't, because I chose myself, and I've never regretted it for a second. She started to cry. Margaret, please. I'm miserable. I've been miserable for 30 years. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, can't you find it in your heart to let go of this anger? I leaned in close to her. Anne, you stole my husband. You conspired to take my children. You destroyed my relationship with my own parents. You participated in a campaign to paint me as crazy and unfit. And you want me to let go of my anger because you're unhappy. Here's the truth. I did let go of my anger years ago. I don't hate you anymore. I don't feel anything for you at all. You're nothing to me. A stranger who shares some history. And your misery? That's just karma. I stepped down her and continued to the exit, where Caroline, Michael, and Emma were waiting for me. As we walked out together, I heard the buzz of conversation behind us. The town that had watched me be destroyed 30 years ago had just watched me return triumphant. The whispers would spread. By tomorrow, everyone in Willow Creek would know that Margaret Sullivan, the woman they had pitied and gossiped about, had become Margaret Thompson, a millionaire businesswoman with a thriving company, a close relationship with her children, and a life that put all of this to shame. As we drove away from Willow Creek, Emma turned to me from the back seat. Grandma Margaret, why did you come back? You don't need these people. You don't need this town. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You're right, sweetheart. I don't need them. But I needed to come back for myself. I needed to show them, and show myself, that they didn't win. That no matter what they did to me, they couldn't destroy who I really was. Caroline reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're the strongest person I know. I'm so sorry for all the years we lost." "So am I said. "But we can't get those years back. All we can do is make the most of the time we have now, and that's exactly what we've done. It's been 7 years since that day in Willow Creek. I'm 64 now, and my life is full in ways I never imagined possible during those dark days in 1985. Thompson Properties continues to thrive. I've opened offices in 3 more cities. I've mentored dozens of young women in business. I've donated millions to charities that support women escaping abusive situations, women rebuilding their lives after trauma. Caroline is now a partner in my company. She's remarried to a wonderful man named Thomas who treats her like a queen. Emma is 21, studying business at a prestigious university, planning to join the family business when she graduates. Michael married Rachel 3 years ago. They have twin daughters, my youngest grandchildren, who are the light of my life. His construction company has expanded to 2 states. He is proud, successful, and most importantly, happy. I never remarried. After Daniel, I dated occasionally, but I never found anyone I wanted to tie my life to. And that's okay. I've learned that you don't need a partner to be complete. You don't need a traditional family to be happy. You just need to know who you are and refuse to let anyone else define you. I decided that I was more than what they said I was. I decided that their betrayal said more about them than it did about me. I decided that I would use the anger, the pain, the humiliation as fuel instead of letting it consume me. I got therapy. I worked harder than I had ever worked at anything. I refused to be a victim, even when that's exactly what I was. I turned my pain into power, my vulnerability into strength, my loss into gain. But most importantly, I never gave up on myself, even when everyone else had. Now, as I sit here at 64, looking back on my life, I can honestly say that I'm grateful for what happened. Not grateful for the pain, the betrayal, or the lost years with my children. Those things were genuinely terrible, and I wouldn't wish them on anyone. But grateful that I was forced to discover who I really was underneath the roles I had been playing. Without the destruction of my old life, I never would have built this new one. I never would have discovered my capacity for resilience, my talent for business, my ability to survive and thrive against impossible odds. Margaret Sullivan, the woman I was in 1985, was small, afraid, dependent, defined entirely by her relationships to other people. Margaret Thompson, the woman I am now, is powerful, independent, successful, defined by her own achievements and her own character. The girl who became a woman when everything was taken became a force when she decided to take everything back. To all the women listening who have been betrayed, abandoned, destroyed by people who were supposed to love them, I want you to hear this. You are not what they said you were. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not too old, too damaged, too far gone to start over. I was 30 years old with nothing, and I built an empire. You can too. It won't be easy. There will be days when you want to give up, when the pain feels too great, when the mountain ahead seems too steep to climb. But keep going. Get therapy. Find your anger and use it as fuel. Learn new skills. Build new relationships with people who see your value. Most importantly, refuse to stay in the victim role even when you have every right to be there. Decide that you will be the author of your own story, not a supporting character in someone else's narrative. Take back your power. Take back your life. Take back everything they tried to steal from you and build something so magnificent that it makes their betrayal look like the petty, small thing it always was. I returned to Willow Creek after 17 years not as the woman they expected. Broken and bitter, but as a woman they never imagined I could become, free, successful, powerful, and finally at peace. That is my revenge.